Right. Back in studio, I have invited more guests to join us. This is in my quest to just get further understanding of what is happening, especially that now everything is apolitical. And I'm happy to have you, Professor Kindiki Kithure, and of course, Wangui Mbatia. Thank you for joining us. I know, Wangui, you heard us talk about representation of the women. I don't want to go into the long details of the legality of it, but how does this make you feel as somebody who's been actively finding voice for the women?
It simply changes the approach. I think now, more than anything, we realize we have won the legal battles, but not the political ones. I don't think the battle is lost yet. We still haven't gone through nominations at political parties. And this is a political season, and it is a game of numbers. I think we still have room to work within the politics of the coalitions. If you want the women's vote, then you will be friendly to the women candidates, so that if we see our face in your coalition, then perhaps you might win the other things. I think for a very long time, the fight for women's rights has been reduced to the boardroom and the legal end of it. I think it is important to start exerting the political influence that women will have. And if you take our experience, for instance, if you look at the turnout of the Rift Valley political returns, if you look at 2007, they had 10 women that are in parliament through the direct vote. So given time, space and chance, we will be able to occupy the offices, perhaps even more than a third, provided that the nominations are fair.
That's just the thing for me. Like you said, given time, given time by the law taking course, given time by waiting for this to come to pass, or given how do you get into this space? I
suppose, again, back to the politics of it, when we started talking about using terms like crisis, there's going to be a constitutional crisis if you don't get a third. It then creates a situation where institutions start averting crisis, as it were. And then you have decisions made by the Supreme Court, as we got, that there is going to be a crisis and we are 3 months to the election. And how do we avert it? That would be one thing. And you have noticed that Parliament has conveniently refused to amend the Constitution to provide for the nomination process within the Constitution. So then that left that way. Then the question would be, why engage in an electoral process if then immediately after the returns are brought in, if we don't have a third of the women, then we would collapse it. But the Constitution also provides for a 5-year transition period. And I think also as a community, as hard as it is for us to agree and to deal with it, it is important for us as the Kenyan community to really just look at the situation and understand maybe that 5 years is not even enough for us to transition, but we should now start respecting the institutions because we are the ones who created them. As hard as it is to swallow the decision from the Supreme Court, it is our last court this is the last word. Litigation must have an end. And they have only said a simple thing, that we can start by 2015. Now, the other challenge is, I think women, it is time now to start also dealing with the politics of getting elected. Look for position within your political party, vie for position. There are a whole lot of positions, from the governor's position, the presidential position. Vie for those seats. Get involved. Well, get involved and get involved
Professor Kindiki, this gentleman here has been working with a lot of institutions, and lucky for me, legal mind too. Feel free to challenge him as a gentleman in that area on what speed is being made. But again, Prof, we're looking for clarity on the issue of alliances being formed. Tell me about these hidden hands. Do you see any?
I have not seen any.
Are there reluctant partners working in these things?
There could be, but Louis, for me, it doesn't matter, because I think there are a number of things in which, as Kenyans, we are losing the debate on how we conduct our politics once more. Right. And that, for me, is my worry. First of all, I want to say that I am very proud as a Kenyan that we have put in place the hardware for conducting our politics and running our country. The hardware is in the new constitution and the superstructure upon which the constitution is built. I don't think in this country, again, it will be possible for politicians and leaders to take people for granted. So for me, when we have a new constitution and its mechanism, I'm less worried about who joins who. So what we are lacking, though, and that's where my worry is the software of running the hardware that we have.
Tell me that in English.
Number one, In English, yes.
Yes, because if you tell me the software and the hardware,
number one,
you're going to lose a lot of the people who are trying to follow the clarity you want to give.
Number one, coalitions are a reality, and I think in a country like Kenya, you need that as a stabilizing factor. In fact, we have even more mature democracies like Switzerland, who practice even beyond what we have now. They rotate their presidency. So in terms of us being sensitive to ethnicity and equity, I don't think that's a bad idea. But what is worrying me is that people have not changed their language. The reasons they are giving why, for example, a person from a certain ethnicity cannot run for office is still crude. That's why I'm saying we have the software in place, but the hardware in place, but the software is not there. Secondly, politics is a rough business all over the world, not just in Kenya. It's a rough business in America. It's a rough business in Europe, in Africa. It's contest, people. It's competition. But the problems we have in this country, the software that we are still lacking, even if we have the hardware, is number one, we've been engaging in the game for too long. And that's why people are a bit fatigued and that kind of thing. I wish these intrigues just started last month. Then we have 3 months of intrigues, as you have in America, and after that we all work together to build our nation. Lastly, what is worrying me is that even as we discuss coalitions and who is joining who, and who is whose project, and who has a hidden hand, which for me, it doesn't matter. Whoever wants to hide their hand or show it is neither here nor there. They're just trying their luck. We wish them well. The voters may reject him. My worry is that none of the two coalitions is coming out clearly, first of all, to promote an inter-coalition discourse beyond 4th of March, and that is worrying based on what happened last time. And secondly, none of the coalitions is even addressing what shamed our country even last time.
Right.
So for me, it's the small things, and we can fix them. I still have hope we can fix them.
Now, even as I speak to you separately, I don't want to sort of have you engage in a debate, but I just want, now that you're here as people who've been around this area, when you hear what Wangui says about it's time to take some hard decisions, have they found their space? Is it the fault of the kind of coalitions we're seeing now that it will continue being a waiting time for the women?
First, I must say, Louis, I am in total agreement with what my sister said here, largely, because I think the issue of inclusion is the one factor that will actually make or break this nation. And that inclusion is generational, it is gender, it is class, it is ethnic, name it. Actually, the theme of inclusion for me is very critical. So I think women, and I want to agree with her, women have got it, but only half of the goodies have been delivered. Again, I'll use my vocabulary or my terminology, the hardware. The Constitution is there. It might not be perfect, but it has laid the foundation for inclusion of women, even post-2015. And I like what she has said. They might have lost a war in the Supreme Court, a battle, but I think the war is not lost. So, because there is life even after 2015. If we can achieve whatever we wanted to achieve now, after 3 years, it's still okay. So my only worry again is the software of processing inclusion of women. And I think of all the other classes that have felt marginalized, women have got the most in the current situation, because minority communities are not even featuring anywhere in this discourse, even in the coalition building. I'm very worried. We're just talking about 5 communities who control 76% of Kenya's population. The rest, nearly 39 communities, constitute only 20%. So in terms of inclusion, I think our women have got quite something, and I'm not saying they have got everything. We'll just have to keep on fighting until we reach there.
Well, I think I want to vary just a little bit from what Professor said. The software is there. What it requires is activation. If you take, for instance, the Political Parties Act, we all engaged in a process of, one, ensuring that every political party is well represented nationally, and therefore it reflects the face of the country, because that's required in the Constitution. We've said that political parties can no longer be regional or ethnic in terms of their composition. We also required of every political party that it must have a third representation of either gender. So that even as we speak and talk about the coalition building, one would have expected that since these are not coalitions of individuals, if you all agree that the submitted agreements were really agreements between and amongst parties, then one would have expected somehow that some of those women that are now incorporated into the infrastructure of political parties would have been part and parcel of the vision we were seeing outside there. Unfortunately, it still hasn't translated, and I think that is perhaps for me my challenge to the registrar of political parties on one aspect. What was the whole point of the exercise of asking political parties to comply to the 1/3 gender rule if indeed it is not going to be followed? That's the first thing. The second thing is we required of political parties that state officers ought not hold office. And now I am seeing left and right statements made by state officers, but ceremoniously you will see the chairman of a political party sign a document.
Yes.
That for me is also a source of concern. We also went through a process where there was a deadline for nomination rules, and we saw parties scramble to submit nomination rules. And then we hear now that there is a process of negotiating quote-unquote consensus. Fine, I have no difficulty with consensus. It's a very palatable word when you come to a country like Kenya that has had the kind of difficulty with elections.
What would you add to the institution that Kindiki is talking about? What is missing in the formation of the institution he's talking about?
The activation for the people of goodwill to show up and hold themselves to the principles that we all espouse as a nation. I'll give an example. Take, for instance, the case of choosing presidential candidates. We all expected that there is going to be a point at which we subject presidential candidates to the GENDRO, the universal suffrage of Kenya. But prior to that, we all expected that political parties would hold primaries. And what we were hoping, because the laws do provide for it, is that now at that stage, the registrar of political parties and the IEBC would come in force to ensure that the process is democratic. Granted, we haven't the time to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's quite short. But we should have seen at least the beginning of an exercise so that in future we know what to remedy and what not to. This kind of negotiations where somebody says, look, I don't want to have delegates come to do their elections, I would prefer that we have a consensus amongst us. Then is another issue. These people that are holding these meetings of consensus, really, one, clearly do not hold any portfolio in their political parties. Two, are a minority because if they have a vote, they are a voter just like any other party members.
Yes.
And how do they, where do they derive their authority to negotiate a consensus on behalf of party members to the exclusion of party members?
We have a conversation that needs to continue, definitely. A closing comment from you, Professor?
Yes,
very quickly.
My closing comment, I think as we make coalitions, as people stretch their hidden or visible hands, or whatever other things they want to stretch, let us know and remember that this nation is so critical to us, and unless we put the nation first, we will lose it again for a second time. My appeal to Kenyans is to register those who have not registered. It is both a duty to register and it's also a privilege. There are many people who are displaced from their homelands and they cannot do what we are fortunate to be doing.
Okay.
Finally, we have become a grumbling nation. For me, it doesn't matter who leads this nation, but they must love Kenya. And I think we must concretize the gains we have, formidable country that we are, and of course, start improving on that so that we can be the great country that we aspire to be one day.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Wangui.